3.1 Arousal, Anxiety and Stress, Ashley Adamson-Edwards. So, arousal. So what is arousal? Arousal is regarded as the intensity of someone's behaviour, no matter the type that a person may be expressing. The intensity of an individual's behaviour which they express refers to the degree of emotional energy that is felt in different situations. For example, during a football match, a footballer may be expressing a feeling of a high degree of arousal due to the high amount of energy needed to play the sport to an efficient degree. There are two branches of arousal. Much like motivation, arousal can also be divided up into branches: somatic and cognitive. Somatic relates to the changing state of someone's body due to being anxious. These physiological changes would be things like an increased heart rate and therefore blood pressure due to more blood being contracted out of the heart due to the release of adrenaline into the bloodstream, and then an increase in blood in vessels to cause more pressure forced on the vessel walls. Additionally, the individual's respiratory values will also increase in order to provide efficient amounts of oxygen to the increased heart rate. Whereas cognitive arousal regards the process which the mind goes through due to arousal. These can be moment-to-moment changes in worry or type of negative thought. Due to the previously mentioned aspects of arousal, we can link it to sports performance and how that may be affected as a result of an individual's degree of arousal. For example, during a football match, a player like John Terry during the 2008 Champions League final may have had a high degree of cognitive arousal as he was about to take his penalty in the shootout for Chelsea FC. In this case, Terry perhaps would have been worrying about the negative outcomes that could occur due to this penalty. Consequently, the moment-to-moment changes in worry or negative thought caused him to miss the penalty and have a negative impact on his team as his team lost the match due to the miss. However, arousal can affect sport performance in a positive way. For example, after Terry's miss, which eventually cost Chelsea the shootout in turn the Champions League trophy, the Manchester United goalkeeper made a big save off Anelka's shot to secure the win. However, due to the huge occasion that Edwin van der Sar, the Manchester United goalkeeper, was playing in, he may have been experiencing high levels of somatic arousal. This would therefore cause his heart rate to increase due to the release of the hormone called adrenaline. The increased heart rate would then provide efficient levels of oxygen to his working muscles in order for more efficient muscle contractions. This may have been the reason for how Van der Sar was able to save the shot due to the high amount of force he was able to generate in order to resist the force from Anelka's shot, which all started from a high degree of somatic arousal. As a result of this, a sport performer has been benefited from being aroused to a high degree as they made a significant accomplishment in their career. Drive theory. Additionally, arousal can be linked to the energized state that will drive a person into learning or performing an action. For example, if the body is put under stress or deprived, deprive them, the individual's arousal levels will increase. Therefore, we are motivated to behave in such a way that these levels will be reduced to achieve optimal arousal. This can be reflected through the drive theory, where there is a relationship between arousal and performance. The relationship is that when there is an increase in arousal, it will be proportional to another increase in quality of performance. However, the quality of the skill being performed depends on how well the skill has been previously learned. For example, if a novice and proficient learner were in a scenario where they had to attempt as many keep-ups of the football as possible on the first attempt, where there are no distractions or external factors increasing their arousal, the novice learner could score 8 and the proficient 20. However, once there is a crowd of people around them who are shouting and offering support in order to increase their arousal, their scores increase with the proficient scoring higher than the novice, due to increase in arousal from the crowd benefiting their performance. This clearly indicates a correlation between someone's arousal levels and their performance levels, however, depending on their skill level. This is because, according to this theory, when arousal is evident in a scenario, the dominant response and behaviour will most probably emerge. The dominant response can be defined as a person's motor program that has been learned previously and will often emerge along with the increase in arousal. Here, the dominant response was the proficient learner's ability to keep up well. However, the novice learner dominant response could be their motor skills. However, due to the novice performer's low skill level, the arousal hasn't been benefited them as much as the expert has been benefited, and therefore, according to this theory, a novice learner shouldn't be put under too high levels of arousal. However, the arousal drive theory struggles to explain how, on some occasions, the expert or proficient learner failed to convert a certain skill to a good standard. For example, During the Champions League final of 2008, when Manchester United faced Chelsea, John Terry was experiencing a biggest night of his career. Along with this, there's many external factors which could have increased his arousal, like the thousands of people in the crowds chanting, or the aspect of millions watching live on TV. Therefore, according to the drive theory, due to Terry's expert learner level in his sport, his performance should correlate with his high levels of arousal. However, during the penalty shootout at the end of the match, Terry stepped up and missed the penalty for Chelsea, which went on to cost them the trophy. This gives a clear indication that despite the individual being an expert learner and having high levels of arousal, the performance was not able to match that degree. Therefore, this criticises the drive theory, as it doesn't explain this. Another theory that's through arousal was the inverted U theory. This theory is similar to the drive theory in that we will be able to correlate between arousal and performance. As arousal increases, so does an athlete's performance. However, with this theory, an athlete's performance eventually reaches a point of maximum, which is referred to as the optimal point of threshold of arousal. Although this theory indicates that an athlete's best performance occurs when the arousal is at moderate levels, this is because according to the inverted U theory, once an athlete becomes aroused to the point of the optimal arousal, then they become over-aroused. Due to this, their ability to perform or carry out a technique of a certain skill is badly affected to the point of deterioration in performance. According to the inverted U theory, the point of under-arousal that an athlete may experience prior to an event limits their concentration. This is due to the individual's attention wandering off to irrelevant cues which don't help them to concentrate on their specific task and therefore would act as a disadvantage to them. The athlete that is under-aroused and now attending to unwanted cues is often regarded as going through a process of daydreaming. Because of this state of arousal, the individual wouldn't be able to efficiently operate their selective attention. Without this, they cannot ensure the capacity for concentrating on different external stimuli at once. Consequently, the process of information overload where the athlete has too many aspects of their sport to make decisions is done inaccurately. The state of arousal is regarded as the prime state that an athlete should be in to ensure maximal efficiency and technique, where potential is at its highest. In other words, an athlete's attention is at its ideal degree, and therefore efficient concentration can take place to make accurate decisions. This, along with important information being able to be absorbed and understood in turn to accurately decide the next action. The optimal arousal point of an athlete can also be regarded as the cue utilization. According to this theory, an athlete will reach an eventful point of over-arousal after processing the optimum level. This could be due to aspects like a large audience, anxiety, or pressure from the event. Unlike under-arousal, where the point of attention is unwantedly expanded, the over-arousal period leads to an individual's attention being extremely narrowed. Consequently, many other external environment cues may be missed by them, and therefore a significant piece of information is failed to be absorbed. Therefore, a state of panic is reached. This current level of nervousness is called hypervigilance. In terms of performer's ability to selectively pay attention to many external factors, the athlete isn't able to operate this during the heightened state of arousal, otherwise known as hypervigilance. The inverted U theory can be linked to sport through examples as it offers an explanation to why athletes act in a certain way. For example, during an experiment where some athletes were there was evidence given to suggest the examples of this theory. Firstly, 3 athletes, which all have the same skill and ability, were given 10 attempts to convert a basketball three-point shot. On the first 10 attempts, they were left with little arousing factors near them, with the other participants who weren't taking the shots to be silent. After scoring an average of 3 out of 10 shots, the athletes were given another 10 attempts. However, this time, the other participants would be equally divided amongst the 3 athletes to give them constructive verbal support. After having their score increased to 6 on average, their athletes were then given their last 10 attempts, with other participants providing over-arousing factors, such as shouting at the athletes, which were quite close to them. It could be argued that due to this over-arousal in their last 10 attempts, the athletes only scored an average of 2 out of 10 shots due to a possible state of hypervigilance. As a result, their ability to concentrate on the correct technique to convert shots was extremely limited, which caused them to score poorly. However, during the second set of shots, the athletes were given constructed feedback in order to push their arousal levels to their optimum point and therefore enhance their ability to concentrate on converting the shots to a better standard. This is then backed up by the fact that they are able to achieve their highest result of 6 out of 10 on average. Whereas during their first round of shots, where the athletes were given no feedback and limited arousing factors, they scored on average lower than in their second round. This could be because they had been experiencing a state of under-arousal during their first round of shots, and as a result, unwanted cues could have been limiting their concentration. As a result, in this circumstance, the athletes weren't able to operate their selective attention to their best ability, and therefore weren't able to maximise their efficiency in converting the shot. However, the inverted U theory struggle to explain how an athlete would usually have a sharp and quick decline in performance if they had reached a high degree of arousal instead of a steady decline. For example, according to the inverted U theory, an athlete would decline in performance at a steady rate after reaching the optimum point of arousal. This could be linked to if an athlete like a footballer was at the optimum point of arousal and managed to score a goal for their team due to their ability to selectively make decisions. However, after this, their ability to performance will slowly decline. For instance, the player can miss their next chance due to the field of attention beginning to narrow. Eventually, their ability to perform will decline to a level that is the same degree during the under-arousal stage. This is where the athlete can be focusing on unwanted cue and therefore ruin their ability to perform well for their team. Whereas, athletes may not encounter this steady decline. For example, once reaching a level of high arousal, the player may instantly start to drift towards focusing on unwanted cues, like the crowd or opposition players giving them negative feedback. Therefore, the player's ability to perform will also instantly drop to a level which acts as a disadvantage for their team. This example provides a scenario that this theory doesn't explain and therefore acts as a criticism towards it. Another theory which attempts to justify an individual's arousal is the catastrophe theory. The catastrophe theory is similar to the inverted U theory in that an athlete's performance quality increases with their degree of cognitive and somatic arousal. However, once their arousal reaches an optimum level, the ability to perform temporarily plateaus until the point of catastrophe. The point of catastrophe is where a huge error is caused by the athlete, resulting in an instant and significant drop in performance levels. This is due to the combination of both high somatic and cognitive arousal causing the athlete to tip over the edge. However, once the catastrophe has occurred, the athlete's performance level can lead to either two ways. The first way is continued decline and their performance by a steadier rate. On the other hand, some athletes may be able to bounce back from the catastrophe incident to a previous higher state of performance. So catastrophe theory can also be used to justify a sportsperson's action during an event. For example, if during a football match a player was performing well due to their high levels of somatic and cognitive arousal, then eventually they would reach their optimum state of arousal. Here they can absorb information to the best ability and also be fully concentrated to make accurate decisions. However, the athlete will also eventually become over-aroused, where their point of concentration is unwantedly expanded to a capacity which may be too much for most athletes to handle. Therefore, the player will go through a catastrophe where perhaps they miss an important chance for their team, like a penalty. As a result of this, the performance significantly declines and continues to do so. From this, as the previously mentioned, the player can follow either one of two paths, where his performance levels increases to a previously high level or carries on declining. For instance, if the player was able to bounce back from the catastrophe, he could perhaps create a goal through an assist to a teammate or a vital piece of defensive play, therefore giving the indication that their performance level has increased back to a degree. However, this point wouldn't be at his optimum level of arousal, as their cognitive and somatic components may still be recovering from the recent decline in performance. Whereas a player could instead continue to decline in their ability to perform, which is due to the fact that they still could be overwhelmed with the different arousing factors. Therefore, the player may go on to miss another chance at their team or perhaps get sent off for a bad challenge. However, the catastrophe theory struggles to explain or to justify how an athlete can go from a decreased level of performance after catastrophe to the optimal level of performance immediately. For example, during a football match, if a goalkeeper was having a good game during their first half due to the high levels of cognitive and somatic arousal, however, the goalkeeper could then be forced over their optimal level of arousal due to the many factors causing their arousal to be increased, like the crowd. As a result of this, their point of concentration is unwantedly expanded, or their concentration is limited, causing the player focus to irrelevant cues. Therefore, according to this theory, the player would go through a catastrophe like conceding a penalty. Consequently, their ability to perform has declined dramatically. However, according to this theory, from this point on, the player can only bounce back to their level of performance to a state which is much lower than the optimal level of performance. But if the goalkeeper was to then save this penalty, then they would return to their optimal level performance due to the importance that the save could potentially have on the game. Therefore, this example acts as a criticism to the catastrophe theory, as it points out that an athlete can return to their optimal level of performance after undergoing a catastrophe.